from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Hello, this is Reverend Charles Harrison with Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And last week we had a great conversation with two former deputy mayors of the city of Indianapolis, John Hall, who worked under Mayor Goldsmith, and Olgen Williams, who was the deputy mayor under Mayor Ballard. And we really dealt with in the early 90s and late 90s and 2008 to about 2015, the strategies of two former mayors in dealing with the whole issue of violence. And we really talked about more of the bottom-up approach. And today, in broadcast, we're really going to deal with some of the key strategies that really worked and some of the root causes that we really tried to focus on to help bring down the level of shootings, stabbings, and homicides in Indianapolis. This is Reverend Harrison, and this is kind of part two of the discussion that we had on our broadcast, where we talked about the whole issue of urban violence and can it be reduced. And we really talked last week about how do you really bring down the level of violence and what strategies have been used in Indianapolis over the years. Deputy Mayor John Hall, as you talked really about resources being given to 7 or 8 neighborhoods, what was the focus of it? Was it to deal with root causes of the violence and what the city perceived as what was driving the violence in the city? And what was the community police strategy to kind of bring it down as you empowered neighborhoods?
I think when we talked about resources, and Olgen's going to have a better view because he was down on the ground, but I think we were looking at improving the quality of life in those 7 or 8 targeted neighborhoods, whether it was fixing streets, sidewalks, building houses. It was those kind of resources that had been missing in the core city areas for 50 years. And so, we wanted to concentrate to make those core city areas feel and look like the suburban areas. Mm-hmm. I mean, so those is my thinking of what Goldsmith was trying to push into those neighborhoods to improve them. What I think we missed, and Olgen may have picked up in Hallville, was how to address schools. I remember we went after looking at what kind of improvements we could do. And I remember hosting a couple of educational forums around the city to kind of get to the root of what, why are students not graduating? Why are students not prepared to start kindergarten? And I think we collected a lot of data, but I think it was Peterson that took it further on trying to address that educational piece. I believe we probably missed on the parenting kind of piece. I think so, and that's a very difficult challenge. And I can remember I taught a little history in my old days and my younger days, and in Du Bois' time in the 30s, 24% of African American women were single with children. Mm-hmm. 2018, what is it?
About 70, 80.
70%, yeah. 80%. I mean, that's a wide gap, and therein lies a challenge for even neighborhood groups who are working on issues. How do we address that? How do we close that gap so that Junior can be successful?
Well, but isn't that controversial? I know that some of the pushback that I get sometime in the community, and I go to Olgen Williams on this, is to talk about those issues of particularly the black family. When we have, I think in the report that Indiana Black Expo did a few years ago, 80% of black children are born in the single-parent household. So when we begin to talk about those issues in the community and the absence of fathers and what it's producing when it comes to particularly young men who have no fathers and they're being raised in the street, it's not a comfortable conversation really in the black community to begin to talk about some of these root causes that we may not want to talk about. We don't mind blaming it on racism, but we don't want to really look internally at what's going on in our community that is also producing some of this. So, Olgen, what do you think about that? Because you was on the ground then when we were talking about providing resources to improve the quality of life, particularly in those areas of the city where we historically have been having high levels of violence.
John's right. Those families, the education piece is crucial for neighborhoods to evolve into better communities, because that's some of the core. The family is the core of any community.
Yeah.
In education, somewhat is the core of the family when you educate your children. And we have been duped and tricked and hoodwinked that our community can do all right without fathers being in the home. That's a lie. That lie from hell, as far as I'm concerned. We find out that families are struggling because of the absent father. And let me tell you, it ain't because they going to jail, because we got some men that haven't been educated going with young about the value of being a father and family. That comes through education. It's come through examples. So it really need it still to this day. And you can't put your head in a hole like an ostrich and ignore the problem, think it's going to go away. Right. No, I used to tell my sons all the time, you got to pay the traffic ticket. It's not going away, son. Pay the ticket. Yeah. Same way with problems. You got to ignore it. You got to identify the problems to get it resolved. And I think we have to move forward. And family is so crucial. When Mayor Goldsmith began to put money into the community through 10-Point Coalition, working with Front Porch Alliance, is another big piece you all did, working with faith-based community, where I worked with Mayor Peterson. Then when Mayor Ballard came aboard and asked me to be a deputy mayor of neighborhoods, I picked up the Goldsmith Front Porch Alliance, 10-Point Partnership, same thing, working with John. It was working. When I saw a reduction in crime on the south side in Hallville, in areas that was really working, called neighborhood people. Mayor Goldsmith empowered, let me tell you, Mayor Goldsmith empowered community with resources. And I said resources, cash money, to be able to do Little League program. One Southside neighborhood ran by a lady friend of mine, I won't call her name, they shut down over 50 crack houses because they had the resources to buy donuts and coffee while they stood out there with a barrel of burning wood, and those guys had to go someplace else. 120 kids in a baseball league, where the parents are coming, where the dad may be selling dope, just got out of prison, looking scary, but he's there supporting his children. In the meantime, they can put something in them. Yeah. About being a father, give them a parenting program. Now, we can't make nobody a good parent, but we can give the information about it. As far as Hallville is concerned, we were able to shut down the biggest crack cocaine was sold on Concord Street, any place in the city. Wow. We shut that down working with the police department because community got involved and wanted to do. But with Mayor Goldsmith, we didn't see, we were able to see good stuff in. So when Mayor Ballard came in, Mayor Ballard believed in the same thing, neighborhood approach. And let me tell you, I was thinking this morning when Mayor Ballard carried on the crime prevention program, which Mayor Peterson actually in council approved, but the election winds changed, and Mayor Ballard became president. He kept it going because it was under my oversight, and we picked that up right quick. I see what's going on there. They paying folks almost $60,000 to do what you do, Reverend Harrison, for a third of that, not even that much. Walk the street. We was giving organizations $60,000 to do wrestling program, to do mentoring program, to do glamour program for young children. people that was in the neighborhood, that knew the neighborhood, and these young people was going every day. No one messed any money up because the accountability was great. Why not give the money to the people that live in the community? You ain't got to give them the money. Just pay for the program. Just pay the light bill. John, you ain't got to give them no cash.
Right.
Just write your check for the light bill.
That's it.
And I want Irma Thomason, young lady missionary, created a program, and she was working with some of the toughest families in Hallville. How was she working? Through their children. Through their children. And got their hearts. And one lady, she just passed, she changed her life, and she started doing programs for 15 years in our neighborhood because she saw what was going on with her grandchildren. It makes a difference. And because Hallville was almost destroyed because they closed 5 schools.
Okay.
Education, I believe in it. And we don't have good education programs and that reach out to the parents. You say, what's a good education program? Parental involvement, addressing, you taught, addressing the issue of the neighborhood and bringing them. So it really worked. And we would put our resources, these foundations, and I hate to say that, give it to the people that know better. I hear the gunshot. I live in Hallville. I hear the gunshot. Where you live on the Riverside, you hear the gunshot. Yeah. So who better knows how to work with your neighborhood than you, John, in Riverside? That's where you live, man. And that's what's missing. And they want to bring. And there's no greater expert than you. You got 2 former deputy mayors here. You been doing the streets. I think we know a little bit. Maybe not everything, but we know a little bit to help make a difference. And what I love about it is so many more people just like us. Probably no more than we do. No, I know they'd be willing to work harder than me right now. I'm retired, John retired, but they know a lot. If you empower them, every community, if you empower, I learned that in Vietnam, if you empower the people, they will control their own destiny and tell you what they need to make it work.
Well, this is real talk, so we can, really get into those conversations and say some things because I think you are right. I think Indianapolis has been successful when we have had a bottom-up approach that empowered neighborhoods and residents to be a part of the violence reduction strategy for their area, and we have seen, great results. From 2009 to 2012, we had 4 consecutive years under 100 murders in the city as we empowered, neighborhoods, and then when the resources was moved from under the mayor's office and community leaders who were determining where the money went to the foundations, that's when we seen the resources shift and the strategy shift, where we was focusing on improving the quality of life, but also focusing on intervention. How do we intervene in the life of individuals who are most likely to be the victims and the perpetrators of violent crime? How do we reach them, intervene in their life, and provide them with another, way of life, that moves them away from crime and helps them to become successful in life? And I think when we have done that as a city, we have been very successful at helping bring down, violence in the city. I think Indianapolis used to be one of the large cities in the country that had a great track record of violence reduction. One other question before we leave: how do we do this today in building these city law enforcement partnerships in the midst of this tension that occurred a few years ago between law enforcement and the black community and the Black Lives Matter movement? Is it possible to still build those kind of relationships with cities and particularly law enforcement with this tension between the African American community and law enforcement? And we had an incident here a few years ago where a young man was shot and killed on Michigan Road that did create a stir in the midst of what we were seeing with George Floyd and other incidences across the country. Can that still work today?
Well, yeah. I mean, for one, I learned you're not going to, I don't care if you're black or white, you got a uniform on, you carrying an AR-15 or whatever you're doing, you come in my neighborhood, Same thing go for you. You can't control me. You can't parachute your ideals for life. I got to make a choice. When you leave with your radicalism and your social agenda, whatever it may be, I got to still stay here. And I got to still work with the police department. I still got to work with them, because somebody come in my house and try to hurt my wife and me, I'm going to call the police. I'm not going to call the tigers from wherever they come from. And we got to build over that. I think it's a myth, it's a misnomer. Media created lots of attention because it was good news people. People I work with, they love to see the police come by and wave at them when they're on the front porch, stop by. They get upset because they don't see enough of them. Mm-hmm. We go to our police meeting, they ain't fussing about how bad they are. They fussing about, well, I want more. And now, are they bad apples? Yeah, John had to fire people problem. I had to fire people because they didn't do the right. Yes, we can build a relationship if you talk to the people and get involved and let the police have a hand in communicating with them and put the attention on them. These people come in here, ain't nobody gonna stop nobody's doing crime. And I found out we got these things about, we got food deserts. I go along with that. We got this. Look, I've been doing this for a long time. I came out of prison. I have never in my life in this work ran into any criminal now that was doing what he's doing because he was hungry.
Amen.
They stole a steak, not because they were hungry, because they wanted to sell to get some crack.
That's it.
They wasn't hungry.
Tell the truth.
Give me a break. No, that ain't right. People are doing crime because they make a choice, a decision at that time. They don't want to do like the rest of us do, go punch a clock for the hour. They think it's the easy trick to go out there and do what they doing, to steal from me and you. Don't get in there. Now, do they have issues? Yes. What we do as community is we bring in programs to help them to make better choices. We can't make them make a better choice, but we can give them better research. Go back to what John said. They may not have been around the education piece, been around the family, to know they can have other choices. And that's where we got to come in and say, hey, John, there's 10 other choices versus burglary. There's 5 other choices versus standing on the corner.
Right.
And that's what John talking about, education. That's part of that whole piece. Give them hope to see what they can become. Look, I raised 10 children in Hallville. 6 sons.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
When none of them in a gang. You know why? Because they come home, they didn't do right, Mary Williams. They feared their mother in a positive sense more than they did me.
Yeah.
I would just,
I know what you're talking
I would
about.
bark,
Yeah.
but she would act.
There you go.
you know what, John?
I know exactly
Now, with that said, their friends were part of the group that didn't maybe have a father. They were down in Christmas House. I picked them up as well. Started a group called Young Men on the Rise. Praise is what we do. We got to give back to it. John always tells you, it's got to work.
Yep.
It's work in it.
It's work.
This has really been a great conversation, and there's so much to this. We could probably do 10 shows, just on this issue of violence in the city and to talk about root causes and strategies to reduce it. I want to thank my 2 friends, John Hall and Olgen Williams, for joining me today on this broadcast, Real Talk. We'll see you again next week on Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Have a blessed day.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.